Welcome to the Disney Parks Podcast with your hosts, Tony Casanova from DisneyByTheNumbers.com and Krista Joy from DisneyWays.com. Keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the podcast at all times. And get ready for the Disney Parks Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Our guest today is the author of Unseen Disneyland, which documents and highlights the many obscure and unique details that are built within Walt Disney's Disneyland. He's got over 325 full-color images in this book, so it just really brings it to life. And you're going to get stories, trivia, and some other fun stuff. Welcome, Russell Flores, to the show. We're so excited to have you.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
Welcome, Russ. Is it Russ or Russell? How should we...
Russ is fine.
Russ, okay, good.
Unless you want to be formal, then we can be Anthony and Russell.
The only person who calls me Anthony is usually yelling.
It's usually the only one that calls me Russell.
So let's start. I'd like to ask everybody this question. How did you, fall in love with, Disneyland and your Disney passion? How did that all come about?
Well, I was actually still, I can't remember if I was actually in preschool or just starting preschool, but my mom got a new babysitter for me for after school. And I went over to her house after school one day, and she had this National Geographic's magazine that had this article about a place called Disneyland and about Tinkerbell and her flight across the sky and that kind of stuff. And so I was asking about it. I was looking at the pictures, obviously. I wasn't reading yet. And so my babysitter, Mrs. Freeman, told me all about this place called Disneyland, and then started telling me about this show that used to be on, that occasionally still was on, called the Mouseketeers, and a person called Annette Funicello, and just really kind of sparked my curiosity about this place. So, of course, that night I went home and asked my mom, what is this place, Disneyland? Why haven't we gone? Of course, at that time we lived about 3.5 hours away, and in my mind, I didn't understand that. Disneyland, everything's right here, isn't it? So eventually my mom took me, and it just was history from there. We would start to go pretty much every 3-day weekend. We would go down there, like on the Friday we would drive down, and then on Sunday we'd come home. And so I got to see Disneyland quite a bit when I was young.
Yeah, that's very cool. I don't think everybody can probably say that, that they've been that many times, and at such an early age, too. Yeah,
and most people don't realize I'm actually fairly old. I'm an old man, Russ. No, I actually was born in 61. So, the time frame we're talking about is like 68, 69. I actually have photos where I went to Disneyland probably in 64. They're not dated, but just based on the way I look and stuff. But I don't remember that trip. I was probably 3 or 4 years old at the time, so I don't really have any memory of that trip. But when I was about 8 or 9, it was when we really started going on a fairly regular basis. At first, we would just go once or twice a year, and then it kind of just built up from there.
So that was still back in the day when they had the ticket books, I would assume.
Oh, yeah. I remember ticket books. We would go to Disneyland and we would get our ticket books. And the first thing we would do is sit on the benches in the hub. And I would go through them and figure out, okay, if we got, so many E tickets. These are the ones we're going to ride for E tickets. These are the D, It really, that was probably the thing that taught me how to manage money, was because you had to manage your tickets and know exactly what you wanted to do.
That's interesting. So we were just talking to Ron Schneider the other day, did Figment here in Disney World. And, Ron was saying that, with the ticket books, it was a different riding experience because you didn't want to use a ticket on, you just didn't get in line, to ride it, because if you had to use a ticket, that was a whole ticket. Now when people drop down there, $105, they want to ride everything.
Right.
Back in the ticket day, you didn't want to give up a ticket unless you had to. So
right, and you could buy more tickets, but like my family, even though we got to go fairly regular, we were still on a budget, so that ticket book was it. Yeah, there was no buying another e-ticket.
Right. Yeah, they probably could have made a lot of money just selling e-tickets.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So do you have a memory, from those early years that kind of sticks out? Whether it's an attraction or an experience that you had with family or friends or anything like that?
The biggest thing that stands out in my mind from the really early years is the fact that, in a kid's eye, your parent is ancient, old. And my parents were separated, and my mom would go on all those rides with me because she wanted to make sure I, had that experience. And of course, I wouldn't go by myself. So, she would go on every ride. And I just remember her being that dedicated to take me, on the Matterhorn, which even back then, it was a slightly different attraction. It still kind of beat you up back then. And, she would ride on all those rides with me. And I just remember that to this day, that she would do that for me.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's what moms are for.
Yeah.
So, and I apologize, I said the name of the book wrong in the intro. I just realized that it's Unseen Disneyland. And you've got a lot of great stuff in there. Can you tell everybody a little bit about what the book's about?
So the book is not a tell-all. It's not a tattletale book. It's not a behind the scenes or, off stage or anything. What it is, it's about the things that the Disney Imagineers meant for you to see when you were there, but maybe either you're not consciously aware that you're seeing them, or maybe you don't know the backstory of that item. As an example, when you're in the queue for Thunder Mountain, there's a mule engine in that queue. It's this kind of strange looking engine that's sitting off to the right there as you're going through the queue. And, most people just think it's probably something that Disney built and, kind of looks cool and, just put it in there for atmosphere. And on the backside of Thunder Mountain, on Big Thunder Trail, there's also another one back there. What people don't realize is that those are actually movie props from a movie called Hot Lead, Cold Feet, starring Don Knotts. And those were the actual mule engines used in that race at the end of the movie. So it's things like that just, wow, you didn't know that there was that little bit of extra put into the park.
There's I love that kind of stuff is what makes Disney parks a Disney theme park and, Six Flags an amusement park.
Right. It's what makes Disney. It's the things that make Disney Disney is the things I'm trying to show you.
Yeah. So, Russ, how did you find all these things? Do people point them out to you, Imagineers or cast members, or how'd you collect them all and had the quest go to get all this info?
Well, the way it all started was one day I was trying to catch up with my family in Frontierland, and this lady was throwing something away in the garbage can. And, probably like you guys, you've seen those garbage cans thousands of times, but for some reason it just caught my attention that day. And I was like, that trash can's meant to look like it belongs here. It's not just a green or gray trash can. It's actually made to look like wood and like it belongs here. So I snapped a picture of that trash can and went on my way to catch up with my family. And I started taking pictures of trash cans all day, and it kind of got to be a joke with my family because they didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I'm just taking these pictures of trash cans, and every time I do it, my daughter would yell, "Mom, Dad's doing it again," because crazy dad's taking pictures of trash cans. And then for the rest of the trip, I started looking at other things like what else have I not really been seeing? And from there, it just kind of built up to where I'd go home and read books and go online and read things. And then we'd go to the park and I'd take pictures of them. And then things while we're at the park, I'm going, I wonder if there's something with that. And I would take pictures of it and then go back and research it. And it just kind of built from there, learning about all these different things. Sometimes cast members do tell you things. Sometimes you go to presentations by, Imagineers, and they tell you things about, various attractions and things at the park. And it just built up over time that, I started getting all this stuff. And after a while, I started thinking, I wonder if I've got something here, maybe I could, do like an online blog or an online web page. And, eventually it kind of, I wonder if this could be a book. And so then I started researching that as to whether it could actually be a book. Had it been done before? And I found out that, there are books that have pieces similar to this in them, but there was no really books on topic of the unseen details. So then I started, working on that. And then occasionally, especially for Disney World, people would come up with something. I'd see it on Amazon and it would kind of sound like similar to my book. And then I'd buy it and take a look at it. Okay, no, it's not. And, eventually I got to a point where I actually had a finished product to publish.
What about, now I've heard a really cool story about your first endorsement. So can you tell everybody about that?
You're talking about the first person to actually review it for me and give me some feedback.
Yes.
That was David Smith from the Disney Archives. At that time, he still worked for the Disney Archives, and he is such a nice and generous man. He's just unbelievable. Basically, there are some key people. There's not just one, obviously, but there's some key people, and he is one of the key people in why there is even a book out. And basically what happened was I was at a point where I had like a first draft. And, I'm thinking, who am I? I'm just Russ Flores. Nobody knows who I am. I've got no Disney credibility other than with friends and family. Do I really have something here that's worth it? Is anyone really going to buy this? And, I was kind of thinking, I've written it. I'm there. Okay, I'm done. And then I got an email because I subscribed to the Ask Dave column, and an email comes in from Ask Dave, and I go, I wonder if he looks at stuff. So I sent him an email and said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I've done. Do you ever look at people's work and give them, feedback and, critique it, that type of thing? And I get an email back from him and says, I'm very sorry. I work for the Disney company. We don't take unsolicited material, which I already knew. I can't look at your stuff. I can't review it. I can't discuss it with you. But if you get Disney Publishing to say it's okay, then I can. And he gave me the contact for Disney Publishing /legal. And so, and I had been looking for such a thing because obviously one of the concerns is, is Disney going to come after me if I were to try and write this? So I got a hold of them. I'm sure you've heard the horror stories. I'm sure you've read the online stuff of people dealing with Disney legal. I have to say my experience with them was totally fine. I mean, the only criticism I would have is it's a big company and things don't move as fast as you'd like. If I were to send you an email, you'd probably send it back right away, and that would be the end of the email. For Disney, they're a big company. It takes time. You send them a letter. 2 or 3 weeks later, you get a response back, you respond to them, and so it takes a little while. But bottom line is I asked them, hey, can you review my material? They explained to me the process for what's called a copyright review. So I submitted my material, and, after some exchanges, they said, they don't give you permission to publish. What they say is, we do not have any copyright concerns. And so once I had that letter in hand, I went back to David Smith and said, I've got this letter. Can you talk to me now? And he looked at it and he goes, absolutely. Send me your product. So nice. I sent it to him on a Friday morning. He, got it and said, hey, I'm really busy right now. I'm heading out the door in a few hours. I'll try and look at it next week, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. And I'm like, hey, you're David Smith. You look at it whenever. I'm just happy that you're even willing to look at it. And later that afternoon, I actually got a email back from him saying, hey, I started looking at it, couldn't put it down. Here's some thoughts. And he had about a page and a half of not really criticisms, but things like, I was referring to things like rides. And he says, we don't call them rides, we call them attractions. So he made it more Disney. And then at the end of it, he basically said, I really enjoyed this. I think you've got something here. If you'd like, here's a comment for the back of the book. And I hadn't asked him for a comment. And at that point, I was thinking, if Dave Smith thinks you have something, then you probably need to finish it and get it published. So that was that little, shall we say, kick in the fanny to get me up and over the hill to actually publish it. And so I've always been very grateful to him for that.
That's a very interesting story.
Yeah, and if you look at the back of the book, the very first comment on the back of the book that says David, that is the comment that arrived that day that pushed me over the top.
There's 325 full color images, Russ. So, who took these? Did they have, significance, or, why? I always ask people, why 325? Why not 425? Being the numbers guy, I have to ask questions like this.
Yeah. Well, all of the pictures in the book were taken by me except for one, and that's the picture of me. That was taken by my wife. In the back, in the About the Publisher page, there's a picture of me holding up a Mickey beignet. That was actually taken by my wife, but the rest were all taken by me. The only significance to 325 is that's where I stopped.
Right.
When you're writing something like this, you could keep going forever and ever and ever. And at that time, I was initially I was going to self-publish because I couldn't get any publishers to actually look at my book, because most publishers don't take unsolicited work. A few will take it if you have a representative, a legal representative. But I didn't have that, so I was going to self-publish. And because of the costs involved, I had to stop at a certain point in order to be able to afford to buy, the books to sell. And that deal didn't work out so well for me. And so I ended up leaving that company, and that's when I met David Smith of Synergy Publishing. David Smith's the author of In the Shadow of the Matterhorn, not to be confused with Dave Smith, the Disney archivist. But anyway, he took me on, as an author, and because of his connections and stuff, the cost per book was drastically reduced, and it allowed me to expand the book out. So the pictures, initially there was more pictures per page than there are now. So that allowed me to expand the pages, make the pictures bigger and a little more viewable, add some pages that I hadn't been able to, that I had to stop. And 325 just happens to be where I stopped. It actually has no significance other than when I finished and I went back and counted them all, that's how many were in there.
Yeah. So it's not indicating, there's only, 325 seen, unseen things. There's certainly more than that. That just happens to be how many pictures that there are on.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, if there were only 325, I wouldn't be finishing up my second book.
Oh, there you have it.
And don't ask me how many pictures, because I have not actually sat down and counted them yet. But the book is basically in final draft right now. I just have polishing work to do, end notes, bibliography, and then go back and do my page counts and photo counts and stuff like that. But the book's out I sent it out to about a dozen people, and I've gotten about a half a dozen people to comment back, so I can, polish it out and tweak it here and there. So hopefully by April 30th, I'll be turning it over to the publisher.
Wow.
Cool. Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah. We'll have to come back on the show.
Yeah, I would love to. And then the follow-on book to that will be California Adventure. So hopefully I'll be doing DCA here, have it done in another year and a half, 2 years.
So do you see you doing like a Disney World, Magic Kingdom, Epcot?
That is my long-range goals, as long as the books continue to sell. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of difference in the way I put those books together, because right now, I'm about 7 hours from Disneyland right now, but I still get to go multiple times a year, especially with the book. I get to go down there to events and stuff like that. So I have access to the park. So I can go down there, take a bunch of pictures, come home, do research. In a few months, I'm going to be going back. Disney World, anything back there, I'm probably only going to get 1 or 2 shots at. So that's going to be more of a true research, and do a lot of research and really have a list of pictures I want before I go, to make sure, that I get what I need the first time, instead of, going to Haunted Mansion, taking, half a dozen to a dozen pictures, getting home and going, I don't like these, and then retaking them again, a couple months later. I'll have to get it right the first time and what I need from them. So those ones are going to be a little bit different. And they're starting to get, people are starting to do books more similar to mine. There's been a couple that have come out for Disney World. I know that at least 3 different authors are working on similar books for Disneyland right now. So we'll have to see what the market is by the time I get to those, and whether it's been saturated and it's done or whether it's still going strong.
Yeah. The Disney market is tough for anything, whether it's an app, a podcast, a book, a pamphlet. It's just, everybody's got the same ideas. It's just who's going to beat somebody to the marketplace. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, for me, even if if there are similar books coming out, I had the market. My book came out December of 2012, so I had 2013, 2014. I've had 2 years head start. I've got my second book coming out, which is still going to beat all of the other 3. So I'll have 2 books out before anyone else actually gets on subject. But so I can't complain. The ideas are not copyrighted. If someone can do it better, then they should knock themselves out and do it, obviously.
Yeah. And to me, it's it's a subject that always grows and changes, and there's always new things to present, and nobody's going to do it quite like you. So that's the other thing.
Right. And every one of all 4 of them are going to have their own flavors. They're going to have their own interests. The things that are in my book are the things that interest me. So right. If someone else does a different book, they might be doing it from a different perspective. There's all sorts of things that are going to vary the books. So we'll see. I'm not a New York bestseller, but I've done well, so I can't complain at all. And the big thing is, and I'm sure you guys experience a similar thing with your podcast, is the book has opened so many doors for me. There's so many things I've gotten to do that I maybe or probably wouldn't have gotten to do, like this podcast. I mean, you wouldn't have invited me on if it wasn't for the book. So I get to come on this fun podcast and do these type of things and do interviews that I wouldn't get to do otherwise. So, the book has been a real, it's been very beneficial to me. So I've been very happy with it for multiple reasons.
Yes, we couldn't agree more with that. So now you've done almost 2 now. So what would you say is there anything that's difficult about writing a book about Disneyland, or what's the hardest thing?
The hardest thing is there's so much urban legends, like you were talking about with Bill last week, with the World's Fair and how these legends get started or these stories get started. You've really got to be careful about your stories and your research. And one of the things you'll notice about my book is I try to really go as deep as I can. Well, maybe not as deep as I can, but I really try to research it. And all of my stuff I have in notes in the books, and one of the counts on the back of the book is the amount of end notes I have. And so the book, the last book has 116. This one, the new one, has approximately 300. In those notes, there might be 3 or 4 sources on some of those. So, when you go to a place like the internet and you try and, you look something up and you read it and you go, oh, that sounds interesting. And, of course, everything is correct on the internet. So we don't have to, double and triple source those. But, you have to really double check a lot of that stuff. And one of the things I've talked about before is that this new book, one of the chapters, which wasn't in the first book, but it's going to be in this next book, is a chapter called Urban Legends. And it actually specifically addresses that. It'll talk about a subject, hey, this is something that's been said, and then it'll tell whether it's true or false, and then what the true story is or why the story is true, and show pictures related to that. Because that's one of the hard things about doing the book. And I actually thought, this could actually be interesting to the reader to actually see some of these stories and how they go. And I actually had one story in another chapter. It was done. I mean, it was in the book. It was done, and it involved Raleigh Crump, and I was fortunate enough to get him to look at the material that's related to him, and he looked at it and goes, "That's not right. that's not a true story.
Oh, wow.
And so I had to rewrite it, and then I moved it to the urban legends chapter and gave it back to him, and he said, yeah, that's good. So even after having done the research and having multiple sources on it, and some of those sources were extremely reliable sources, I actually went back to one of them and told the person, hey, this is what I found out from Raleigh Crump. What do you think? And he's like, oh, okay, well, that's good to know. So those type of things, that's what makes this book the hardest. And I didn't want I didn't want to be a fool to start with, obviously, but I didn't want to put out bad information, and I didn't want to propagate bad rumors. So in the first book, I was very, very careful about, researching everything. And then the people that I sent it to for reviews, like Dave Smith and Bill Cotter, they're subject matter experts. And so when they looked at it, one of the benefits to me was that did they find anything wrong? So one of the things that was found is I sent it to one person, and there's a quiz in there. Spoiler alert for anyone, you might want to fast forward like 30 seconds, but there's a question in there, what's Minnie Mouse's real name? And the answer is Minerva Mouse. And this particular subject matter expert said, I've never seen that before. I don't think that's canon. And so I actually went to the original source. I had the source reference. I actually went and bought the original comic book that was referenced and copied the page and copied the cover, sent it to that person, and showed them where it was from. And they said, you're right. This is a Disney product. It was done by a third party, but it was a Disney official licensed product. It's in there. It's canon. So I was able to, support what I had researched. So that's the hardest. It's the most rewarding part of the books, is to be able to find that. And since the book actually came out, I haven't had anyone. I've had a couple people challenge me, and then I was able to produce the material for them. I haven't had anything disproved yet in the original book. Knock on wood. Probably now that I said that, someone will send me an email and disprove something. But
yeah, it's the same thing kind of with my website too. Is people always. Well, where's that number from? And, it's usually a book or a TV show or something that Disney's produced, or even, Disney's own press site that
right.
puts out facts about things. And they're constantly changing. Last year was 60,000 cast members, and now now they're saying it's 70,000 cast members at Disney World. So, numbers change. It's not, the number of things change. But, your content, I think the attractions may change, but the stories behind it typically do not change.
Right, and it's like in the book, there's a reference to the secret bathroom at Disneyland, and it was a great story for the book. I really enjoyed it, putting it in there. I've gotten a lot of comments on it, but unfortunately, it got removed during the Princess Fantasy Fair expansion into Carnation Plaza. It's no longer there. So when we reprinted the book, one of the printings, and we officially redesignated it a second edition, I actually added a little blurb in there about the fact that it had been removed. The original first edition book, says that it was there, but the second edition makes note that it's since been removed. And that's another thing, is Disneyland's constantly plussing, and things are going to change in that book. And, I make note of that in the disclaimer that, it's accurate as from the point it was published, but beyond that, things may change with attractions at the park. Another thing, I had a gentleman at a Disneyana convention. He came up to me and proceeded to tell me what a piece of trash my book was. And his whole concern was like the trash cans. The first chapter's on the trash cans. Obviously, that's what got it started. So that's what I talk about in the first chapter. And he goes, you don't have all the trash cans. You missed this one, and you missed this one, and you missed this one. And then in this chapter, you don't have all of these. You missed this and this and this. And we had about a 45-minute discussion. And I had to explain to him, the book is not a 100% documentary book of every trash can in the park. It's to point out the details of the trash cans, but leave stuff for you to go and find yourself. I mean, what would be the point if I put everything in there? Then there would be no point for you to go look for the stuff. So it was kind of funny, because at the end of the conversation, he takes the book that he had been holding and pointing at, the whole time, and he sets it on the table and shoves it at me. And so I take it and I put it back where, when you're at a table, I'm sure you've seen authors, they have their books kind of fanned out in front of them and stuff. So I put it back, and he takes it and shoves it at me again. And I'm like, it's like he didn't want it out on the table. And so I kind of jokingly said, well, are you going to buy this? And he said, yeah, it's worth the $20.
Oh, he said, like, who do I sign this for? What's your name, sir?
Yeah. He actually had me sign it, but he didn't want it personalized because that ruins the value.
So, Russ, who would you say should buy your book? Is this, the first time visitor, the seasoned veteran, the annual pass holder, who do you think the audience for your book would be?
I try to put stuff in there for everyone. I try to put simple stuff that will, pique the interest of someone who's never been to Disneyland and excite them to go, for people who maybe go a little bit, but, don't go that often. And even the more seasoned, I try to put some more difficult stuff in there. I always enjoy it, when, subject matter experts all the way down to, veteran guests say, you know what, I found stuff in that book I didn't know. That is like one of the ultimate compliments for me, is when someone says that has gone to the park a lot or is a subject matter expert and goes, I didn't know that. It just makes me very proud that people find stuff like that. So I try to make a little bit of something for everyone in that book. And like I've said, it appears to be, hitting everyone. It doesn't seem to be hitting one specific marketplace.
That's fantastic. So on that thread, what are some of the details that most people don't know about that you get to tell them through the book?
Well, like one of the ones that came up recently was a friend of mine is a very big Star Wars and Lucas fan. And he was telling me, I've gone into Indiana Jones, I don't know how many times, and I never knew that truck was used in the movies. and that one seems to come up quite a bit, that people are like, that's the actual movie prop. That's not just, something they built. And so some of the, I actually got challenged on that at one point, and I went back and reviewed all my pictures along with the movie and everything, and satisfied myself that no, this actually is. And since then, I've actually seen additional interviews and stuff that, that is the truck. But when you think about it, if you look at that truck, there's these two bars that come up off the bumper, and at the top of them, they have these little round balls. And if you look at those little round balls, they look like golf balls, and that's because they are golf balls. And what those were bars for the stuntman when, if you remember in the movie, Indiana, the character, gets punched and he falls off the front of the truck and is hanging onto the bumper and is about to get run over by the front wheels. And that bar was there for the stuntman to hang on to so that he didn't actually really fall. And the balls were put on top so their hands didn't just pop off the top when they started climbing back up. If you think about it, why would Disney go to all the trouble of adding that bar? That bar is very insignificant. Very few people would ever notice it. So if you were going to put just a prop in there, you just put the truck in there. You wouldn't bother to add that little bar. So little details like that, you go, oh yeah, I remember that bar. And you go back to the movie and you see it and you go, oh, look at that.
It's cool.
Yeah. So, Russ, are there any good stories in the resorts? I mean, I know Disneyland Hotel's got, a very long, rich history. Is there anything that you have in your book that references the resorts?
Actually, the book is confined just to the park itself.
Okay.
I made a conscious decision, because originally I was thinking maybe I would do, Disneyland, DCA, and the resort, and then just Disneyland, DCA. And I decided, there's so much good material. I'm just going to concentrate on the park. So this book is specifically on the park. The only thing that's outside of the park proper is I do reference the bathrooms outside the main gate, and I also reference a trash can that's in the Esplanade. But other than that, everything in the book is strictly the park. As I mentioned, the before in our pre-interview, my third book that I'm in tentative planning right now is going to be on DCA. So, and I will concentrate on that. And I actually thought about in the second book maybe including some stuff on the resort itself, but there was just so much rich material for just the park, and the demand that I've gotten from feedback and emails and all of that is for more Disneyland, because my original intent was to actually, my second book was going to be DCA, but I have gotten so many requests to get more material on Disneyland. I decided just to go that route and then make book 3 DCA.
Tell us a couple of your personal favorite hidden gems at Disneyland.
You know, they're all so good, and my answer to that question changes from interview to interview depending on how I feel. But some of the ones I really like, of course, the trash cans, because they got the whole thing started. It's like the mule engine. It just fascinates me that Don Knotts was touching that, because I'm such a Don Knotts fan, that the fact that one of those two engines he was touching or had touched, maybe both. I know he wasn't one of the ones in the race, but at some point I'm sure he touched those. But some of the other stuff that I really enjoyed finding out about was like the organ in the Haunted Mansion, the one in the ballroom, being from the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea movie. Things like that, where you've seen them in one place and then you read about the history of how it ended up there, and it's like, oh wow, I remember that movie, and that's so cool that it's there. That's one of my favorites right there is the organ, and just learning things like that is the ones that fascinate me the most. It seems to make perfect sense in hindsight, but before I started learning about the park in this way, the fact that there's so many movie props there at the park, of course it makes perfect sense. I mean, Disney was a studio, and that's where they started, and was their bread and butter. So the fact there's movie props actually in the park makes perfect sense. But you don't think about it when you're just going there and like, oh, that's an organ that they got from some yard sale or something. Well, it's not. It actually has some rich history behind it. There, and then like I said, another thing that really interests me is there's a lot of details and behind the scenes that I've been fortunate enough to see. You'll never see them in my books. You'll never see them on my webpage, because I was lucky to see them, but they're not meant to be seen. So like I was fortunate enough one time to be in Space Mountain when it had a syncing error and all the lights came on. And of course my camera was out and I was blasting pictures everywhere. And I have those pictures, but except for maybe a few family friends, they'll never see the light of day. But that kind of stuff fascinates me too, when you see that behind the scenes. Now, of course, they don't mean for you to see that. It was just, a lucky break on my part. But
So, have you ever worked at Disneyland? I mean, you sound like you know your ins and outs of the park pretty well.
So I have to do a little disclaimer here. I have not worked for the park. I have never worked for the park. I am not associated or affiliated with Disney and have no official association with them. My book is not an official Disney product. It is an independent artwork and study. So no, I would love to. In fact, I always joke around with friends that when I retire from my current job, that I plan to go to Disneyland and either be a sweeper or a monorail driver. Can't decide. But they both sound good to me.
I want to do it, but I want something inside where it's air conditioned. It's probably a lot hotter and humid here in Florida. So, something inside, a resort maybe might be fun.
Yeah. And it's like, it's like Christmas. Do you really want Christmas every day or not? And I think it would be very fun to be at Disneyland, but then again, can it take some of the excitement and uniqueness off? You talk to people who've worked there. Some say yes, some say no. So, there's that aspect too. And would I really do that? Probably not. But, it would mean moving south away from my entire family. So there's other obvious considerations, but it's a dream. I would love to do that. I even thought, well, maybe we would just move down there for like 6 months or a year and just do it for fun for a year and then come back
see what
home.
it's like. Yeah.
Just to say you did it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it. I don't know. I don't think it took away. I worked in the parks, and I don't think it took away. It all depends on your perspective. Yes, you're going to see a lot of things that you can't unsee. To use your book, but you're going to be backstage and things like that. But I still think once you're in the magic, you're in the moment, you're with family or you're with friends, and you're enjoying it as a guest, not as an employee. You don't walk around going, oh, yeah, I know how they do that. There's still the suspension of disbelief, Yeah,
and a lot of that stuff I know from doing my research, and I have a number of friends that have worked there at the park, so, I get to hear about a lot of different things and how things work, and, like I just found out something about the Haunted Mansion that just totally blew my mind this weekend, and so when I go in 2 weeks, I'm actually going to look and see if I can see what the person pointed out. Like you said, for so far, none of that's really ruined the magic for me. When I go there, I just go there to enjoy the park. I don't, a lot of people go there, they find things out and they go there to pick it apart and stuff, I don't, Disney gives 1,001% to make your experience enjoyable, and once in a while something may trip up and stuff, but overall it's a great experience, and I just go there to enjoy it.
That's a great attitude. I love it. All right, so let's let everybody know where they can find you online, how they can get the book, all that good stuff.
So the book's available, pretty much any place you go to a bookstore. They may not actually carry it, but they can get it. Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, they can all get it, usually within a day or two. You can go online to Amazon. It's, of course, available there. All of those are obviously going to be, unautographed. You can go to my webpage, which is www.sudbooks.com, SUDBOOKS, and you can order it there. There's 2 links on there. You can actually click on one and go to Amazon and purchase it from there, or you can actually purchase it directly from me. And if you buy it from me, unfortunately, I have to charge shipping. I normally only charge about $15 for the book, which is $5 off the normal price, and shipping's normally about $5.60. But it comes autographed from me, and personal autograph. So if you order it from me and say to Fred, that's what it'll say. So those are places to get my book. As far as following me, finding out what I'm doing, Facebook is probably the number one place to come see me besides my webpage. I'm Seen Unseen Disneyland on Facebook. I'm always putting things up there, and whenever I'm at the park, you'll see a sudden flood, or if I'm just at any kind of Disney event, you'll see a sudden flood of pictures, and I usually do a lot of posting when I'm at the park. I'll be there in a couple weeks, and I'll be there again at Tinkerbell after that. Other places you can find me is Twitter. I'm at Seen Unseen D, and if you have questions or you have comments or whatever, you can reach me at author@sudbooks.com is another way to get a hold of me.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and just so excited to let everybody know about Seen Unseen Disneyland, and the fact that you're coming out with a new book. It's just so much great things on the horizon. So thank you, Russell, for spending time with us tonight.
Well, and thank you very much for having me on. It's been very fun to be on here.
All right. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you in the parks.
Hi, I'm Tony.
And I'm Krista. Tune into our show, Stars and Motor Cars, Saturday afternoons at 6 p.m. Eastern on Sorcerer Radio.
Every week, you'll hear us chat with Disney legends, Imagineers, and actors like Pat Carroll, the voice of Ursula.
And I help?
Yes, I do.
Disney legend and Imagineer Bob Gurr.
Pedro Hare, the voice of Belle.
Feast! Disney Resort TV's Stacey J. Oswald.
And author Ridley Pearson.
And Bill Farmer, the voice of Goofy.
Something wrong here.
And so many more. You'll also hear your favorite Disney Parks Parade music.
Follow us on Twitter at Disney Podcaster and on Facebook.com/Disney Parks Podcast.
To get even more Disney fun, download our sister show, the Disney Parks Podcast, on iTunes. Tune in to Stars and Motor Cars, presented by the Disney Parks Podcast, Saturday afternoons at 6 p.m. Eastern,
3 p.m. Pacific, only on Sorcerer Radio.
SRSounds.com.
The Disney Parks Podcast is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. All Disney parks, attractions, lands, shows, event names, etc. are registered trademarks of the Walt Disney Company.
Like a bolt out of the blue, fate steps in